All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Clancy Nixon. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for the City of Durango. This is our meeting for Downtown's Next Step to get feedback specifically from employees who work downtown. About a week ago, we did the same exact meeting just for downtown business owners. I know some of you are here repeating. Same meeting. So again, thank you for being here. A couple of things. I want to introduce Chadwick over here. You want to come up, Chadwick, and say anything? He's our interpreter for today. Doesn't seem like anybody needs interpretation, but if somebody is kind of waiting in the wings, you weren't sure if we were going to have interpretation, he is here today. So I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey folks, me llamo Che. My name is Chadwick. I also have a small business. If you are interested in learning Spanish, that's what I do. If there are Hispanohablantes, you're welcome to sentarse conmigo. Thank you for having us back. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. We're also going to go through our Indigenous land acknowledgement for the City of Durango, and I would ask that you reflect on this with me. This is a call to honor and respect Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. As residents and visitors of Durango, we are called upon to educate ourselves about the history and cultural heritage of the land we inhabit. The City of Durango is situated on ancestral homelands and territories of the Nuchu, Ute, Jicarilla Apache, Pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi Sinom, Hopi, and Dene Navajo nations. The original stewards of this land were forcibly removed and exposed to countless atrocities by the United States government, including repeatedly broken treaties, forced assimilation, the tragic legacy of Indian boarding schools, and the loss of ancestral homelands. We recognize lasting generational trauma exists within Native communities today. We affirm the continuing importance of ancestral sites to descendant communities as integral to the living cultural landscape. This acknowledgement only becomes meaningful when combined with accountable relationships and informed actions. May this serve as a step toward inclusion and reconciliation. I would invite you to learn more. We have some resources on the footer of our City of Durango website. So if you haven't checked that out yet, I would invite you to go there to find some resources to learn. Okay. This is our agenda for today. We're going to start off with a presentation from both our utilities and our multimodal teams to present this 30% design and any updates based off of our last few meetings. If this is your first Downtown's Next Step meeting, welcome. I know a lot of you are returners, but I'm looking forward, and I know we all are looking forward at presenting this design and collecting your feedback so we truly do have a design that is reflective of our community. Downtown Durango is extremely personal. I feel really personal about our downtown streetscape and just being down here, and I know I'm not alone. So I would ask that you all remember that we're all coming to this meeting feeling very passionate likely about this project, knowing this is the heart of our community. And just remember that when you're speaking with each other today, and we're going to have a breakout session, we're in smaller groups, and know that that passion is really reflective of the heart of our community. Okay, so we're going to start with the presentation. We'll have the breakout groups where you'll learn more about the elements. There's a lot of elements in the design of this project. And so the breakout session will be kind of like speed dating. We'll kind of roll you through different stations quickly. This is not the end of us listening to you. This is, it's going to feel short and quick and hopefully sweet. But if you feel like you didn't get enough information from us, please reach out. We are listening to you. And then we'll also come back together after the breakout session to answer any questions you may have kind of as the whole room together, okay? And then from there, I'll just do a quick conclusion of what's next and what to be ready for coming down. Sound good? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Devin King, our multimodal manager.
Thanks, Clancy. Hi, everybody. Shocking experience up here. Again, my name is Devin King, multimodal manager for the city. Thank you all for being here. So we're going to go through, in this presentation, the project background, the design status, and our community engagement efforts thus far and moving forward into the future. So I'll go through brief project history for those who haven't been a part of our engagement efforts this far, but basically in 2006, downtown Durango went through a vision and strategic plan process. Interesting enough, the design that came out of that, because we were looking at improvements to downtown Main Avenue, the design that came out of that 2006 strategic plan also looks pretty similar to what we're talking about now with curb extensions at the intersections. Multimodal transportation plan. So this originally came out in 2012, and we've had 3 iterations of it since, but it also calls for improvements on Main Avenue for pedestrian and accessibility purposes. Downtown Overlay District. So this is in the Land Use Development Code. It has specific guidelines for the way buildings should look, but it also has specific guidelines for streetscape, which this project is also fitting into. And then the comprehensive plan, which is the overall outlook for the city. So the project was prioritized by the Multimodal Advisory Board back in 2021. And then they forwarded that to the council, and city council adopted it in the budget for $400,000 for streetscape improvements in 2021. We put it out for bid, and we got 2 proposals. Both were around $1.2 million, so more than we had budgeted. During the same time, so this was going on concurrently, a visioning and conceptual design process was conducted by the Community Development Department, so that's our planning and building department. And during that, we had quite a bit of outreach that occurred at the original point. We started off with vision and goals. So we went to the community and said, what are the vision and goals for downtown Main Avenue, Durango? And then from that, we created 4 options, and we sent those out to the community, got feedback, and then we created a conceptual design. So the design started, this design process, which we call kind of the engineering design process. So conceptual design is pretty lines on paper. It's kind of pie in the sky ideas, but now we are actually putting things to paper, or putting things to the ground and figuring out how this works. So we started off with surveying and analysis for the corridor. And we did a preliminary design, which some of you may have been at the meeting at last year, for the 600 and 700 blocks. And then we started the utilities design during that same time as well. So for some of you that were in the presentation or in the meeting last week, this is a new slide. And this is going through the safety and accessibility statistics. It's something that came up quite a bit during the roundtable comments, so we wanted to get it on a slide for everybody to see. But this gives a brief breakdown of kind of what we see on Main Avenue currently for pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, everybody, which, just a quick reminder, anytime you drive, if you get out of your car at any point in time, you become a pedestrian, so just remember that. So speeds, average is about 15 miles per hour, 31% are over the speed limit. We have about 6,000 to 7,000 vehicles per day. So between 2012 and March of 2024, we had 444 overall crashes with 28 injuries, and 26 pedestrian crashes with 19 injuries, 6 cyclist crashes with 1 injured. And then crash types resulting in injuries are pedestrian crashes, cyclist crashes with the most, broadside, front to rear, curb, and other objects. And I just wanted to highlight that because, when we're talking about improvements for safety, that's why we're really focused. There's a lot of front and rear crashes, there are a lot of broadside crashes, but if we look at the ones that really have the most injury, it's pedestrians, cyclists. Accessibility, non-compliant curb ramps and sidewalk throughout the corridor. We updated some back in 2007, 2008. But not all of it got updated. And then also over time, sidewalks get cracked and they get worse over time. So that was still over, 13 years ago. Accessibility also had 2 designated accessible spots on Main Avenue. So, just think about how long the corridor is, and we only have 2 directly on Main. So engagement efforts during the conceptual design, we had 19 meetings. Those included stakeholder meetings, meetings specific with businesses, bid meetings, 2 questionnaires. We had 2,203 responses to those 2 questionnaires. So I think one was like 900 and then the other one was about 1,200 responses. So again, the first questionnaire, we didn't have any design. We were just asking people what they wanted to see. And about half, somewhere right around half was, people wanted a pedestrian mall. And then the other half was, wanting something else. So we definitely kind of met in the middle, because the second design, we had 4 alternative options. We also had a one-on-one meeting, or we had multiple one-on-one meetings with business owners and others. And then we had an online review period with 58 comments on the design. So we also had engagement efforts for the preliminary design, which is still what we're in. And our original public meeting was back in March of last year, where we had 94 attendees. So it was a good turnout. We also had a community questionnaire in May of last year, where we had about 700 responses. We had a focus group where we had 9 members, and those 9 members represented a lot of different facets of stakeholders. So it was business owners, it was folks in the county, it was folks in the city, it was people living with a disability, it was cyclists. Kind of had a whole group of folks with different perspectives. And then we had a business forum in August where we had 100 attendees in that. So real quick, I know that this comes up quite a bit. So City Council passed a resolution, or they adopted a resolution back in September of last year. And what that resolution said, which we have the language up here on the screen, but basically we received a grant for $640,000 to design this project, and that was from the Department of Local Affairs. And that was to finish up design. So City Council said, finish up design, get construction estimates so that we understand the full scope and aspect of this project, as well as the pilot program. So the pilot program, which I'll get to here in a little bit, is what you see downtown on Main Avenue right now. So that is what staff is doing. We're continuing the design of this project until we get to the point where we have a construction estimate at the end and have a better understanding of the true costs and impacts of this project. And with that, I will turn it over to Evan Tyler with our Public Works Department, and he will provide more information.
We kept it easy for you, Devin and Evan. Now you know who to send your comments to. So yeah, my name is Evan Tyler. I'm with the Public Works Department. I'm a project manager for capital improvements. And we're going to talk about the lesser seen side of downtown, which is the utilities. So in short, the utilities under Main Ave are old. Most of them are 50 years old. Some of them are even older. For our water, are we on water? Yeah, our water pipelines, they were installed pre-1960, so they're 60 plus years old. And back in the day when we were installing pipelines, you would dig a hole, you'd put the pipe in the ground, and then you'd put all that material back in the ground. What we're finding out now is that material we were putting back in the ground was corrosive. It's known as a hot soil. So these cast iron pipelines that are on Main are starting to slowly corrode over time. On top of that, we have several fire hydrants on Main that were installed pre-1974. So they are also very old. They are past the point where we can no longer continue to service them. We still have plenty of fire hydrants on Main. We're still up to code. But over time, we're going to see more and more of this, and we have to start considering replacement of our fire hydrants on Main. And the last portion of the water utilities is our isolation valves. They're just as old as everything else. They're just as corroded as everything else. And they're at the point where they do not seal well. When you go to close down a valve, it does not all the way close. And so we can't effectively shut off the water supply on Main for maintenance, repairs, etc. Our sewer, same thing, installed pre-1960, it's very old. It was mostly clay pipe, just about everything under Main is clay pipe and brick manholes. They don't hold up as well over time, they're starting to crack. We're getting infiltration and exfiltration of water and sewer in this case. This picture on the left, you'll see one of these clay pipes that has cracked. I'll point out it looks very pretty because it was cleaned before this picture was taken. Not all, I guarantee none of our sewer pipes on Main look this good. But in the bottom, you can see a giant crack, and that's where sewer is unfortunately able to leak into the ground, as well as other water, other dirt and debris is able to enter the system. It makes issues for long-term maintenance and can eventually cause some problems for us. Last but not least, we'll talk about our storm drain. Sound like a broken record here. It is, you guessed it, very, very old, 50 plus years old. There are a few blocks where we have gone in and done some rehabilitation efforts. You can actually line the pipelines. That's like this one on the right. Most of them look like the one on the left here. They're dirty. They have issues with blockages and debris accumulation. It's expensive to maintain them. Some of them are getting to the point where they're becoming extremely difficult to maintain, and in the foreseeable future could become a problem long term. So what's this mean in the grand scheme of things? We have years and years of preventative maintenance that has been neglected on Main Street. And I know you're all thinking, well, why haven't we been performing this maintenance? And what I will tell you is we've been a growing community and it's been difficult to balance. And on top of that, it is a phenomenon we're seeing in municipalities all around Colorado. This isn't unique. We're struggling with it just as much as the folks on the other side of the hills are. So we're in the stage where we're just reacting. It's reactionary maintenance. If there's a break, we have to go out, we have to try and repair it. That can be very difficult now that we have valves that aren't sealing, so on and so forth. Because we can't perform maintenance as well, we have potential for water quality issues. Right now, water's fine. It's potable, it's drinkable, but when we have the event of a break, or in the case of where we want to maintain them, you go and you flush high volumes of water through the sewer, or the water lines. And because of their long deferred maintenance, they have a lot of buildup. And if we were to go and try to do maintenance on them now, we would see issues with groundwater at many of the businesses in towns that could take days before it could settle out. The utilities are old, they're brittle, they're hard to maintain, and nothing is going to go wrong tomorrow. It's not going to be a catastrophic failure, but in the long run, it could. We need to start considering replacement. I'll point out that on the right here, we have a picture that talks about the risk rating of various pipelines throughout Maine, or throughout town. Maine is orange, and what I do want to note is this risk rating, it is not purely based off of the condition of the pipe. It is also about who it's going to affect. How is it going to affect? Maine is relatively high risk because we obviously acknowledge that if maintenance is deferred and we continue to see large breaks, the effect to downtown businesses is very large. That's also something we obviously want to consider as we discuss the possibility of replacing these pipelines in construction and so on and so forth. So where are we at right now? We're in a preliminary design for the utilities on Main Ave. We need to continue to confirm where are these utilities actually located. We can go and we can put stripes on the ground, but we want to confirm utilities locations vertically to outline possible conflicts. So we're going to do that by performing some potholing, which is where you use a truck to excavate a very, very small amount to get eyes on that utility, as well as using advanced technologies called ground penetrating radar, where we can essentially bounce a radio frequency into the ground and figure out exactly where they are. We did, in past studies, get an engineer's probable cost at 30%, but at this point, it's anybody's guess how much it could cost. They aren't accurate. We are struggling, especially with everything going on right now, to get accurate costs because we have an engineer's estimate, and when the contractors come back, they're giving us numbers that are 40%, if not higher, over the expected costs. There's a lot of challenges in estimating the costs and estimating construction, who it's going to affect, and it's obviously all things we're considering. But at the end of the day, utilities need to be built first, and then we can talk about what's going to go on the surface. So with that, we'll talk about what's going on the surface.
I'm going to try to pick this thing up so I'm not bending over. Okay, design status. Where are we at now? So We are working on the full streetscape design for the corridor, so that's 5th to 14th Street. And we're going out to the pub right now. We're coming out to you all to get feedback. And so this is the second of 4 meetings. We'll have 2 others. We also have a visitor survey that we're working with Visit Durango and others on to distribute with just people that are coming into town. And then the pilot status. So some of you may have driven down Main Avenue today. And again, the pilot was funded by a Revitalized Main Street grant. And the pilot has a couple purposes, which I'll get to in just a second. But pilots and curb extensions were put out in April. And we have artists that are painting the curb extensions. And we'll be adding planners later next week. Hopefully. Design updates. So based off of the feedback that we got during the preliminary design, we have already made some updates to the preliminary design for the rest of the corridor, and so I'll get into those here in a second. So the pilot project. Again, the pilot was funded through the Revitalized Main Street grant program, which was through CDOT. And what we did with that money is we put out 2 pedalets. So we already have 1 pedalet out in front of Fired Up Pizza. We got 2 more, and we put them out in front of Taco Libre and Maria's Bookstore this year. And those do a couple things. It demonstrates what wider sidewalks look like, but it also demonstrates what having bistro space looks like. So bistro space is different than bump out. Bistro space is up against the building versus a bump out is where it's in the street. And then temporary curb extensions with flexible posts at College 7th and 8th. So if you were driving down this morning, you probably saw some folks that were painting some murals out there. Last year we didn't end up having time, so that's why we did the red paint. But this year we had plenty of time, so we got the murals out there and they're looking nice. But it also allows real-world testing of turning movements so that we can see, okay, like what is the impact to delivery trucks? What is the impact to just regular everyday drivers? How does this look on the ground in real life? So we are getting feedback. We've taken multiple videos and we've heard from some folks as well. So now we'll get into the actual design, which we have a full roll plot over here, and that is going to be part of the breakout groups. But kind of wanted to walk through what some of these features are with everybody. So this is the 500 block, and as you can see, what we've done is the parking on the west side is remaining the same. However, we're converting the east side to parallel parking. What that allows us to do is add more sidewalk space. In some of these green sections, and what we term as the curb extension, these are bioretention areas or bioswales, so that is where we are doing water quality. So right now, all that water, when it rains, it just basically goes straight into the storm drain, straight into the river. So these would actually filter that out so that it's not, other things like oil or even trash sometimes ends up in the river. These will kind of filter those out. And as part of the city's MS4 permit, which requires us to do water quality when we're disturbing a certain amount of area. This, we're just showing, it could be something like a child's playground area. And then these are the curb extensions at the intersections that are intended to create traffic calming, also improve safety for pedestrians by getting them closer to the roadway. It allows them good sight visibility down the road. It also allows cars to see them, and then it also gives pedestrians a shorter distance. So again, I think any of us in this room have at some point parked their car, gotten out, and walked to a store on downtown Main. Am I correct in that? Everybody's got out of their car and walked? Okay. So everybody in here is a pedestrian. Got it. Good. Glad we covered that. So we also have loading zones on the side, and these loading zones, we have basically 1 per block, kind of like we do now, except these loading zones are a little bit longer, and that's to accommodate larger trucks. Also, we are showing bike racks and things like that at the curb extensions, and then these dark circles are new trees, the lighter ones are existing trees. So with that, the other thing I'll point out on the 500 block is brick. So right now that's currently what's down there, and we're just planning on maintaining that brick pavers. So for the 800 block, this is out in front of the main mall. This is more of a typical section down Main, but again, what we see is the curb extensions at the intersection, the bioretention areas, and then one thing that we've kind of talked about and heard a lot about is the loading loading zone in the center left turn lane. We've seen issues that some of the trucks tend to move farther towards the intersection or closer towards the intersection. That causes backup problems. So we're putting in dedicated left turn lanes, and then that helps, really designate, here's the loading space to try to be in the middle of the block for loading occurring in the center left turn lane. We also are showing loading zones and then ADA accessible spaces in there as well. And just so everybody knows, these little gray patches that we kind of see spread out in the sidewalk, those are intended to represent people walking around. So the flexible blocks, this is something that we didn't see during the earlier 600 and 700 block preliminary design, but now we're seeing, because this is between 9th and 11th Street. So these are kind of unique, and what this is basically it is a curbless street section with raised intersections. So essentially there is no curb. What we're showing is bollards that would separate vehicle from the sidewalk. But then what this allows is if we were to shut this down, like let's say, so this summer we are actually piloting having some farmers markets on these 2 blocks. So during that time, we will shut down Main on those 2 blocks so that vendors can put up their tents and folks can walk around. And this would allow us to do that easier, but also would allow that space to be more functional because all of a sudden you don't have a curb and gutter that kind of like separate the sidewalk versus the street. This would allow that just open free flow. And we have some curb extensions here in the middle. We have a trolley stop, but also these are good spaces for seating, just good spaces for gathering as well. And the new trees, if you see round orange reddish circles, those are going to be what we call fruit trees. So they're usually a little bit shorter, or ornamental trees. They're shorter, and I'll get into some of that in a little bit here in a second. So some design updates. What did we hear last year when we did our feedback, and what did we change? So curb extensions were reduced in length, pretty much as we could on the actual curb extension sides. And I'm probably going to pause here in a bit. But those curb extensions, some of them are those bioretention areas, and those bioretention areas have to be a certain size to capture all the water that's on Main. So we can't shrink those necessarily a ton, but some of that other space we did reduce to just the red zones there at the curb where nobody can park, and basically it's unused space to begin with. Turning lanes at each intersection, which I pointed out. So this plan is a parking reduction of 38 spaces. The original conceptual plan was a parking reduction of 50 spaces. But we all love the train because it's great. So we have a reduction of 38 spaces, which is lower than the original 50 spaces, but I will say that 16 of those spaces are due to us extending the... Clancy, I don't think we factored that into our time, did we? So 16 spaces are actually being lost because we are extending the spaces from 20 feet to 22 feet. So we've heard a lot over the years that folks with longer trucks, and especially ones with like a hitch on the back, aren't able to park on Main because they're too long for our current spaces. And the city land use code actually calls for 22 feet. So that's where 16 of those spaces are actually being lost. So that leaves 22 spaces that are being lost from the rest of the project. And so currently, right now on Main, we are losing 31 spaces.
38.
38. No, with the current bump out program.
30.
Yeah, I believe it's 31 with the current bump out program. So this is 7 more spaces than we currently are losing during the summer. So we do have, originally the conceptual plan didn't have as many loading zones, curbside loading zones, so we added several back in. And one additional comment on those are 40 feet. So some of the ones on Main right now vary in length, kind of all over the place. Sidewalk widening was reduced from 5 feet to 3.5 feet. So this is corridor wide. If you go out there right now, you're going to notice between the parking and the travel lane, there's about 3.5 feet. So we're taking that 3.5 feet and just adding it to the sidewalk. And then maintaining the existing travel way width, which what that means is the current lane configuration and the lane widths that you see out there is what's going to continue being out there even with this project. So with that, I will turn it over for Clancy, and then we'll get into the breakout groups.
Thank you. Okay, so there are going to be some unknowns here, and I know there's some questions that y'all want us to answer. Part of community engagement and inviting the community to the table to provide us their feedback, especially this early in the process, we're not going to have some answers because we don't have that full design yet. So some of those are the construction timeline cost or the phasing of construction. Council in their resolution has told us to finish the design. They haven't asked us to go into construction planning or anything like that. Like we're at full stop after the design process. And so we won't be able to answer any questions about construction, phasing, what's going to happen with construction and the resources available for businesses downtown, for instance, because we're just not there yet. Or we may not be there at all. Kind of depends on council's direction. Snow maintenance, same thing. We don't have a complete design, so we can't really answer a whole lot of questions about the maintenance of getting snow off the roads downtown quite yet. Landscape maintenance, same thing. We don't know what our landscape is going to look like as far as like what the trees are going to look like and the greenery down there. The sidewalk being replaced, we don't know if it's going to be all of the sidewalk or some of the sidewalk in the design. So again, another unknown. And then the construction funding, again, we're not looking at construction at all because we have not been told to do that yet by council and given us that direction. So there are some pieces. We're bringing you in early, asking for feedback. We're in this design process. So we're right now at the 30% design. And the next meeting will jump to 60% design. What that means for all of you is that this phase right now is where we can make the most changes. Once we get to that 60% design, it's going to be less significant changes to the design, just so you're all aware of like what that means, 30 versus 60. That makes sense? Okay. So we're going to jump into breakout groups. Okay, we're going to go ahead and jump into our general question and answer. Now that you've had a chance to learn about a variety of different elements with this design. I know it is very tempting to raise your hand and throw out a comment that you feel really passionate about, but I would ask that we ask questions so folks can be really informed. They may have come here, their question has not been answered yet. And so I just want to be respectful of that if you have a question that you need the answer to in order to feel really informed, to provide us with your comments on your worksheet, please, this is what that's for. So the question and answer. If you would like to make comments, the worksheet is the best spot to do that so we can capture that effectively. So does anybody have any questions? We're going to do 20 minutes. It's going to feel short, but it's 20 minutes. I'll give you this is our last question, our last 2 questions warning, just so you're prepared for that. But 20 minutes of question and answer, and then we'll close out and I'll tell you what's next. Sound good? All right. Who's got a question? Who's going to be great? Ask the first one. We answered all your questions. Okay. Wow. I'm gonna give it 1 minute. What?
They're all got pizza.
All right. All right, Ellen.
I actually don't have a question, but what I was going to suggest while we're pondering, what are some other questions that have come up? What came up in the previous session?
Yeah, I think we added a slide to this presentation compared to the one we did last week about like the construction phasing and the width of the sidewalks and whether we're gonna tear up the entire sidewalk. So those questions, I think those are pretty common ones that we were hearing, and so we answered those in that slide. But yeah, ready to hear more. Yeah,
Did
Bill.
you go into the thought process of going to the 22-foot length parking spots, which allows large vehicles to park on Main?
Yeah, I can
With the
say,
big reduction in parking spots that entails.
I'll probably let Devin handle like the more nuanced version of this, but from when I've been involved as a community engagement specialist, we did have responses come through in our survey, saying like, from county residents, for instance, saying like they have longer trucks and they don't feel like they can fit into those spaces, but I'll let Devin kind of talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we also know that we issue quite a few parking tickets for folks that are overhanging on those 20-foot spaces, especially longer trucks with trailer hitches and those kind of things. But then the other piece of that is our land use development code also dictates 22 feet versus 20 feet. So currently what we have on Main Avenue doesn't necessarily align with what we have in our land use code. So talking about the other day, what came up is some people did mention, well, can we do compact car spaces so that not all of them are 22 feet, maybe some of them towards the end of the blocks or shorter, 20 feet. And that's something that we are talking about and taking a look at. So yeah, that's where that came from.
I was just wondering about a sign as you come in, oversized vehicles, go to the transit center, something like that.
So one thing, again, kind of what Clancy was telling us is one thing that we've heard, and I would say the bulk of it has been from county residents, is we don't feel welcome in downtown Durango because our vehicles don't fit. And I think, and what we heard from businesses is, hey, a lot of our business comes from the locals, comes from those county residents, and, like we heard from some of the retail shops. And that was kind of passed along. So, as with anything, we're trying to strike that balance of like trying to make, because I think part of this plan is also how do we make Main Avenue for everybody and as welcoming and accommodating. It's definitely a balance. And are we going to strike it perfectly? No, but we're going to do the best we can with it. And that feedback's helpful.
Thanks, I just hadn't heard the background of that woven into that.
Any other questions?
Wow. I can't believe it.
Okay, I'm gonna move on, and feel free to raise your hand if something pops in, but I'm gonna move on to what's next and what we're doing with the feedback. So all of your feedback, we're hosting 4 different meetings. We also are putting out a survey to tourists and folks who are coming downtown from out of town, because they are also key stakeholders. And so we're taking all of that feedback and we're gonna bring it back to you after kind of synthesizing and going through it. In our July 22nd Engage Durango Forum. I don't know who's been to one of those. Those are not necessarily project specific, so they're not as lengthy as this on like the details about the project. We'll give a quick 15-minute-ish presentation giving you that information back. And then from there, it's a breakout session, just meeting with a bunch of city staff members and all of our departments are represented in the room. So it's not specifically for Downtown's Next Step, but the presentation portion of it is. There'll be a quick question and answer session there. Those we will record. We've recorded all of our Engage Durango forums and we'll put them on our Engage Durango website. Who's been to Engage Durango before? The website. Okay. Raise your hand. Hi, I'm proud. All right, cool. Great. Thank you. If you haven't been to Engage Durango, it's engage.durangoco.gov. I'll have a QR code here in a second. But we have 37 different projects that we're asking for feedback on that site. So if you want to learn more, see the timeline of projects, there's always document libraries, recordings of the meetings that we've done. So if you're curious about all the things that we're working on in the city staff, that's a great place to start. So we have these public meetings in June. We're jumping into the Engage Durango Forum July 22nd. That's at the Rec Center, 5 to 6:30. And then there's going to be the 60% design. So all of this feedback, we're not only like just presenting it back to you, this will go into that 60% design plan. And then we'll also present that back out to you once that we have that 60% design. From there, like I said, there's going to be, we'll ask for feedback again, but it will be on a smaller scale, not these larger questions that we're asking you. And then the 90% design, not a whole lot of feedback that we're seeking at that point in time. At that point, we're pretty much done with the design and we hand it over to council for further direction. Okay, so last week I've already talked about the downtown business owners. By the way, who in here is a downtown employee? If you could raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, it looks like. 12 folks. Okay, so about half the room. Great. We also have a residents meeting next week, so that's on Monday. So if you want to show up to another, feel free. It's the exact same thing that we're doing, unless you give us great feedback and we tweak the process slightly. But really, it's going to be the same presentation, all the same things. But if you know somebody who wasn't able to make it today, that's a great one. Residents, by residents, we mean anybody in this area, not city residents. So county residents, happy to join, but we would love to see them there. Anybody who's frequenting downtown and considers them semi-local, some semi-local. The accessibility meeting then, that is a stakeholder group we want to speak with. Our seniors in our community, as well as folks who may have an accessibility need, because that's definitely a key stakeholder that we want to talk to when we're talking about improvements downtown. This is a QR code right here, just to provide us with some feedback on how we did today. My job as the community engagement specialist is to make sure I meet the needs of our community when we're asking for feedback. So if you had a great time, let me know. I want to know the good, the bad, the ugly, so we can shape these experiences and these feedback sessions the way that our community wants to be communicated with and give us their feedback. So again, like I said, this is not the only place that you can provide us with your feedback. This is a very efficient way for all of us as staff to get together and chat with you and hear from you. But we also have, you can email us, call us, we can set up coffees, going out and discussing things further if that's something that you would like. So just feel free to reach out to us. My cards are on the back table over here. I have the QR code also laminated or in an acrylic stand right there. And then that survey is on the iPads now that you use for check-in. So if you don't want to use your own device, you can fill out the survey really quickly on your way out. It's less than 5 minutes. And then there's a QR code to our Engage Durango website. So if you just type in Engage Durango, it'll probably pop up with our Engage Durango site, and you can type in downtown's next steps of the project to find it. Is the easiest way. Okay. Last chance. Any questions? Yeah, here.
Why was the meeting 2 to 4 p.m. during business hours?
That's a great question. Why was the meeting 2 to 4 p.m. business hours? We felt like this was the easiest time if you're a downtown employee, that this is kind of the lull in the rush, especially if you're a restaurant worker, for instance, kind of in that in-between zone, was the thought process there. So if you feel like that was a bad call on our call, like on our side of things, please let me know in that survey, or just feel free to come up and talk to me if there's something that we missed. I did the Durango Tango and worked at Ken and Sue's, and that was kind of my thought process there. Anything else? Eat the food. I saw the food back there. Please eat it. There's a lot of ways. Worksheets. Sarah is holding up back there, our transportation director, the tray that those go in. Please put those in there before you leave today. If you need a little bit more time, come talk to us and we can work something out. But those are really, really key to this process.
Take care.
Please leave your worksheets. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming and being engaged community members. We really appreciate it.
Nice to meet you, Shirley.